and her sister, Blanch Horn, who lives now in Midwest City. And we're going to let Mary and Blanch, sisters, tell us a little bit of what Broken Arrow was like when they first arrived. Anything that you can remember, we'd like to hear it. Anything that you would like to get in a conversation about between the two of you, we'd like to hear it. Now, let me ask you, Mary, would you like for us to bring your chair up a little closer? Would you like for us to bring your chair up a little closer?
Yeah, if you want to.
Okay. Turn it off a minute, Andrew.
I haven't seen Bob since he was a child, and
Yeah.
I have never met his wife.
I'm his wife.
Huh?
I'm his wife.
This is his wife.
You're Bob's
yeah,
wife.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we had not met.
Yeah, you're who I talked to then.
Right. I'm
okay.
Donna.
My hearing is so bad, and my ears are old like the rest
yes.
of my body.
Tell us how old you are right now, Mary.
Beg pardon?
How old are you right now?
I'm 100 years, and since the 15th of last month, I was 100.
Okay. What's it been like to live 100 years?
Well, I just can't describe much of it anymore. It's so different when I grew up. We had no cars when I was growing up in our town, and a very small town in Arkansas where we lived when I was all my growing up days until I married and moved away from there. And it's just, I don't know if I could describe very much of it. I really don't know how to start describing it.
When did you come to Broken Arrow?
I came to Broken Arrow in 1931.
Okay, did you live in that one town you grew up in until you came to Broken Arrow?
No, after I married in 1920, while we moved in several different towns where my husband really had work. He was working on the bridge crew up on the Arkansas River for different towns.
I see. So what brought you to Broken Arrow then?
Well, we decided we'd settle here. My folks had moved out here, and we came out here had 2 children getting into school, so we didn't want to be changing them every year on bridge jobs, so we came out here to call this home. And he still got with the Army Engineers out of Tulsa and worked several different places around in this area in different states. And then in 1940, he was sent to Panama. He had been stationed in Panama in the Navy in World War I, and he'd always wanted to go back there and got a chance to change jobs, to stay with his company here. Lived out of Tulsa, and they moved down there in 1940.
Okay, you're going a little bit fast for me. Back up just a little bit.
Okay.
You came to Broken Arrow in 1931 because your parents were here.
Yes.
And who were your parents?
J.O. Ledbetter and Lily Bell Ledbetter.
Uh-huh. And they had moved here when? Do you remember?
We moved here in 1926.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You were with your parents at that time?
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh. And she was in Arkansas married at that time?
Well, I don't remember where she was when we came out here. She said they moved around a lot then. I was 13 when we came.
All right.
Or almost 13, I guess. Anyway, we settled in Pryor for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And then we came on to Broken Arrow in the fall of 1928. I was a sophomore then.
All right. You moved from Pryor to Broken Arrow. Mm-hmm. When you moved to Pryor, was that also from Arkansas?
Yes, we came directly from Arkansas. My dad had decided he didn't want to teach school anymore. In the early days, he did a big variety of things, but his last thing had gone back to teaching, and he decided he was tired. He thought he was too old to teach, so we came out here where his mother and his brother was.
Okay, so your grandmother was already here then?
Yes, she came.
And your uncle
before we did.
And who was she?
Mary Pell Wright.
Mary Pell Wright.
Ledbetter.
Uh-huh. W-R-I-G-H-T.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
And that takes us way back when you think about how long that I knew my grandmother well. And she was born in 1849. She went through the Civil War and did some of the fighting, actually trying to take care of her young husband that was killed in the Civil War. And she had Abraham Lincoln for president.
Yes, your grandmother.
My grandmother.
Uh-huh.
And my grandfather, then she married in Texas, and My father was born just 2 years after Abraham Lincoln died.
But her first husband was actually killed. Your
Yes.
grandfather was killed in the Civil
No,
War.
not the grandfather. She was very young, and he was killed in the Civil War shortly after they were married. And then she married Grandpa Ledbetter, Arthur
Oh, but
Brooks.
okay, so he wasn't your grandfather, but that was her first husband.
That was her first
okay.
husband.
And then she married.
Arthur Brooks Ledbetter. And she married him in Texas.
Uh-huh.
And then they came up into Arkansas later on.
Okay.
After most of her children were born.
Uh-huh.
My father was born in Texas.
Her president was Abraham Lincoln. So reaching back to your grandmother, and being this generation reaching forward, we're reaching all the way from Abraham Lincoln to Clinton.
Well, even before Abraham Lincoln. And my grandfather was born in 1845. So see.
Yeah.
And I knew him some, but he died before I was very old.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandmother lived until after I was married, so I knew her well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing how many years
Yes.
we have spanned.
Yes. Well, okay, you were 100 years old, October
The 15th.
the 15th, so you were born October 15th in 1899.
Mm-hmm.
If you live another 2 or 3 months, 6 weeks, you will have lived in 3 centuries. Is that right?
And didn't hear.
You were born 1899,
Right.
so if you live another 6 weeks or so, you will have lived in 3 centuries.
I was the third child of 9 in the family.
You said you would have lived 3 centuries.
Oh, yes.
In 3 centuries.
Yeah, so it lived to
The
this
19th
till
century, the
yeah.
20th century, and the
Yeah, when we get
21st century.
to 2000, why it'd make my third century.
When you
Right.
came to Broken Arrow,
I came to 31.
as a young bride then,
No.
no, you weren't a young bride.
We had been on work in Arkansas, Marlton and Dardanelle and Alma.
Okay, you'd been married about 10 years at that time
married,
then.
well, I was married in 1920 and came here
Okay.
in 31.
Okay. Were the streets paved yet?
They
Was
no.
Main Street paved yet? Or was it
I
muddy?
don't remember.
It was paved.
I think Main Street was.
Uh-huh. But the side streets weren't paved at that time, were
No.
they?
And there's grocery stores on Main Street, and we could call our groceries in, and they deliver them twice a day to our homes. And
The mail was even delivered to our house twice a day. And if I wanted to write a letter to somebody and get it off, didn't get to the post office in time, I could hand it to the man that picked up the mail. I'd give it to him on the train. He'd stick his hand out as the train was leaving and take my letter.
And that was like for 3 cents, wasn't it? The stamp was 3 cents.
I think it was less than that at
Was
that
it?
time. I think I remember the day that it went up to 3 cents, because my father kidded me. I got a special delivery letter, and he said he was just trying to get it here before the postage went up.
Do you remember who the mayor of Broken Arrow was when you first came to town, Mary? What was that before or after the only woman mayor we
I
had?
remember Ms. Owenby. I don't think she was mayor when I came here. Maybe she might have been. I'm not sure about the dates.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember those either. Our father was city clerk for one term after
Was
we
he?
came here, but I don't remember who the mayor was.
Was that an elected
Yes.
position?
Mhm.
Uh-huh. Were you driving? Okay, cars were more prevalent than horses and wagons at that time, weren't they? Excuse me for interrupting myself, but did you and your folks come in a
came
car
first.
or horse and wagon?
We came to Oklahoma in a car, and our transportation after we got here was in somebody else's car. We didn't keep our car very long because actually we just bought it to come to Oklahoma in.
Oh,
And
really?
my father he hired a driver. He never did feel comfortable driving.
Mm-hmm.
So unless we were going quite a distance, we walked.
Uh-huh.
Everything was walked.
Did-
I walked from 4th Street out to the high school, the old high school. I'd even go home for lunch.
Mhm.
But walking, I think there might have been one car on the campus.
Do you remember who the principal was when you went to high school there?
When I finished high school, R.D. Patterson was principal and coach, and C.S. Anderson was the superintendent.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember any of your teachers?
I remember Miss Dora Esslinger well,
Uh-huh.
and some of the others I remember, but I would be afraid to try to put names to them right
Mm-hmm.
now. Names evade me if somebody asks me. But I had good teachers.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were 3 girls in a family of 9. Do I
Mhm.
remember that? You had 6 brothers.
Right.
Uh-huh. And did you say you were 3rd from the oldest married?
9 children.
3rd of 9. And
Now
which?
she's number 3.
Okay, which number were you?
Oh, I'm way down the line. About 7.
7. Uh-huh.
I was 7.
And you have another sister who's also still living.
Mm-hmm.
What's her name?
Betty Sensabaugh. She lives in Cincinnati, and she was the last one. She's number 9.
She's the youngest one of
Born
all.
1920.
1920.
Mm-hmm.
And all your brothers died.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 2 brothers older than me and the rest were younger.
Uh-huh.
And she was the first sister I had. I was 13 when I got my first sister, and 21 when I got the next one.
So your parents had a wide span of childbearing
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
production.
The children were never all home at the same time. The
Mhm.
older ones grew up and were gone before the younger ones were born.
Uh-huh. Tell us.
The 2 older boys were married and had children before the last child was born, in our family.
Uh-huh. So
So Betty,
those.
my youngest sister, when she was born, she had 2 nieces, a year and 2 years older than she was.
Right. Uh-huh. Well, that happened a lot. That was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of 11, and my youngest brother is younger than his nephew.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my sister is. Well, no, she's not. But my youngest brother is. Two younger brothers, younger than one of my nephews. Did you work in Broken Arrow? Either one of you?
I worked a little bit, not steady. I've had on inventories and Hunsaker's dry goods store, and there's different stores at inventory time. I worked. There's all I ever worked in Broken Arrow, and worked on the election board at election time for several years.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you had to do the figures by hand,
Mm-hmm.
and she was good at that.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And
What-
while she was figuring upstairs, while I was going to college, this was deep depression time, and we didn't have any money to just, to do very much with. And like Dolly Parton, nobody ever told me I was poor, so I didn't know it. I had a very happy home, but I would come home and work a while. And speaking of inventory, to figure out the yardage on the piece goods, because people sold everything then and made all their clothes mostly. But to figure out the yardage, we had to count the folds, how many, instead of to see how much was left. And by counting how many wraps around this cardboard piece was, they could figure out how many yards it was. So I spent hours counting those folds.
So you also did inventory, huh?
Oh, well, yes,
Work
I
in
did it
inventory.
downstairs, but she did the figuring
Oh, I
upstairs.
see.
She would do the figuring in the office.
Well, you did have an adding machine, didn't you?
I don't think so.
No? You
No,
didn't
I-
even have an adding machine there in the beginning? Did you have one?
Yeah,
Tut, tut, tut,
yeah,
tut.
they had adding machines in
The old
Hunsaker
mechanical.
store. We used them some.
Yeah.
But the election, I don't think we had. I don't remember any. We just counted paper ballots and used our pens.
I was going to ask you about the
But we didn't
the
have-
ballots were paper then.
Yeah, and counted each one. We'd be all night, election night, counting, getting them counted, and put in the boxes so they could take them back to Tulsa.
Did you ever have any elections contested so
No.
that you had to
No,
recount?
I never did.
You're getting both of them close up when they're talking, okay. All right, you came to Tulsa, and your husband was with the Corps of Engineers.
Yes,
And then he wanted to go to Panama. Did
Yeah.
you go to Panama with him?
with the engineers. Yeah, he'd been in Panama during World War I in the Navy, and he'd always hoped to go back there and take me in to let me see Panama. So we went in 1940. He was sent down there, worked on air warning stations in the jungles out of old Panama, getting ready for the war. And they went in September 1940, and we got in December 41, I guess.
And you were there in Panama
Yeah.
Mhm.
when the Japanese bombed
Yeah,
Pearl
uh-huh.
Harbor?
Yes, it's quite exciting
No,
then. And
no, not at that time. You weren't there when they bombed these, were you, Mary?
no, not when they bombed Pearl.
I think she was back.
Yeah, we were there. We went
I guess she
in
was.
1940, and Fletcher went in 1940,
She
and
went 41.
September, and we went in January.
That's
We had to
right.
wait till he get quarters approved for us to come down, and well, Pearl Harbor was born in 41, wasn't it? We were
December.
there. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
we were there.
It was.
We were there from 1940 to 43. We came back home in summer
Yeah.
Well,
43.
I hadn't made that connection.
Yeah.
My life was so full, I missed out a lot of my siblings' things.
Well, I think you do.
I knew she was
You go
there.
different directions.
And she sent things to us from Panama, a dress from my first little girl, and she's always so good to us. But the years have gone by, I forgot that she was there at that time.
And you said something about college.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you go to college?
Northeastern.
At Tahlequah. Uh-huh.
And that was that's sort of interesting what it was like at that time.
Yeah. Tell us.
Broken Arrow, of course, was small. It was less than 2,000 when I moved here. And then Tahlequah didn't even have any dorms. And we had to re-enroll each 9 weeks. And this is what amazes everybody. It cost $5.50 to enroll each 9 weeks, which made $11 a semester. That included our student activity ticket and however many hours we could carry. I tell you, it was depression time, and dollar went a long way.
Sure did.
But that's
Did you
amazing.
enjoy school?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what did you major in?
Math.
Uh-huh. And what did you do with that?
I taught for 32 years.
You taught math for 32 years?
Mhm.
Uh-huh. What grades?
Most all the time, almost always after I was married, I taught in high school. I started out in my first year of teaching was here in Broken Arrow, and I taught the overflow class of 5th and 6th grade. Then after, you don't want to know my first school?
Sure.
After we were married, why, he lived over in the Braggs, lived at Braggs, and he was teaching in a one-room school.
Your husband?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, my husband. Sorry about that.
What was his name?
Kermit Horn.
Kermit Horn.
Kermit
Okay,
Kermit
he taught in a one-room school at Braggs, all right?
outside of Braggs.
All right.
And he taught 2 years in that school, and then when we got married, he finished up his school and I finished mine. Then the next year, we were able to get into a 2-teacher school, and we did that for 6 years.
The two of you in the same school?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
I taught the lower grades, and he taught the upper grades.
Now, where was this?
That was still out in, we call it the Sand Hills, District 49, outside of Braggs.
Mm-hmm.
And we adjusted into that real good. We thought we had a good school. One interesting thing about it is when the lunch program started, the first year that we were able to get lunches, I'm not sure when Oklahoma started this, but the first we knew about it was in 1937. And about the only thing we had to cook was a soup mix and prunes and rice. And that's just about all I can remember. And at that time they couldn't have a cook. So they set up a stove behind my desk and I cooked for all those students, and we had quite a few. I used to say I stirred with one hand and taught with the other. and then we would feed them, and the girls would help me clean up after lunch, during the noontime hour. And we did that the first year, and the second year that they had the lunch program, why they were able to hire cooks, or a cook, and we had a cook that got it ready for us. But that was the first lunchroom that we had there.
In the same classroom,
Mm-hmm.
you had the stove where you were cooking lunch for them.
Yes, the stove was set up right behind me.
And you washed dishes there, or did you take them
Mhm.
outside and wash them, or what?
we had to draw water out of a very deep well, and the boys would bring the water, and the girls would help us do the dishes there.
How many students would be there?
Probably at least 75 in both rooms. The children came in from all around in the country there. Had lots of Indians.
And you fixed lunch for 75 children every day?
It was cooking this great big pot. I was young and I could lift them, and I had a real tall Indian boy in my room that should have been in a higher grade, but he wasn't. And he was the one that would come and lift when I'd tell him it was done, he would lift it off and set it on my desk. And then at noon we would serve it from the desk from there.
How about that?
And that poor boy was killed during the war.
Oh.
Every time I think of him lifting the beans off for me, why, we'd have beans one day and soup the next. That was about all we had, but those kids were glad to get it.
Because they didn't have any lunch otherwise. They wouldn't have eaten. Yeah, to remember him and knowing that what his destiny was going to be at that time would have been sad, wouldn't it? Mm-hmm.
I still have a plate that he gave me.
Mm. Okay, then from that school, where did you go to teach?
The war started, so in 1942 was our last time out there, and we moved into town, and he and my husband started working out at Camp Gruber because of a little bit of a health problem. He wasn't accepted to go to be inducted into the Army, so instead he worked at Camp Gruber until the war was over, and then they hired him as superintendent of schools there in Braggs. And he stayed there until 1950. In 1950, we went to Western Oklahoma for 6 years, and there's where I started teaching my math in the high school in 1950.
What town was that?
Outside of Alva.
All right. Both of you teaching there again?
And by that time, we had 6 children.
All right. So you didn't come back to Broken Arrow to live then?
No, never did.
All right.
I never did come back. My mother was here, but I never did come back to live.
Okay. You had 6 children. You graduated in 1928?
1931.
31, okay. You came to Broken Arrow in 28. Okay, all right. All right, now, when you were down in Panama, Mary,
Yes.
You stayed there even after the war started?
We stayed till 43.
Well, was there any activity down there as far as war was concerned?
No, it was just the war was everybody.
Okay.
We were down there protecting our service, our people from up here, supposedly.
Okay. Was the language down there mostly English, or was there some Spanish?
We had government had schools down there. Our son was a year and a half like a year and a half been through high school when we went down there, and he went his junior year and then finished high school down there and entered the Air Force down there.
Oh, okay.
While my husband was still working there, and so my husband, we would have stayed longer, but he had malaria a few times, got it from working in the jungles, the air warning stations, and so he had to come out on that account, leave Panama, and so our son was there in the Army Air Force at that time, and he pretty soon transferred back to the States and was an officer's training school in 2 or 3 places. And then when he got out of service, he went to Stillwater to got his degree from there.
Was his name Philip?
Philip.
Philip, okay. He's the one then Bob was telling me that they were friends over there at OSU.
I don't think Bob, was Bob down in Panama?
No, over at Oklahoma State University. Oklahoma A&M.
I don't know if they were there at the same time or
They
not.
were.
Yes, they were there.
But Philip was older than Bob.
They did. Well, he was, but they had a couple of years there that they were there at the same
He finished
time.
high school in Panama and then enlisted down there.
Right.
And the others here had gone ahead of him.
Right. Well, see, Bob also went into the service and then came back. My husband also went into the service.
Yeah.
And then came back to school and finished school after he finished his first
All the
in the
boys
war.
Our boy, my boy, of course, I didn't want, mamas never want their boys to go to war.
No.
And he said, well, my mom says, this war's not going to last always. He said, all my friends that having to go from Oklahoma, and he didn't have to go down there, but he enlisted and went on saying he wanted to be part of the war problem.
Right.
And he married after he got through and went to college and went to work for the an oil company out of Houston. Then he married in Florida,
Mhm.
and he and his wife are both passed away now.
He never did spend time here in Broken Arrow then.
No.
Okay.
After he married, he was never just come to see his mama.
Right. Okay. What is the biggest difference in the people, or is there a difference in the people that you knew in the way that life? Well, of course, what I'm asking you is a leading question. Life is so much more cluttered now than it was then. It was so simple then.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Like you say, you could walk to school and even walk home for lunch,
Mm-hmm.
and then walk back to school and then walk home again,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't feel like that you were being punished by having to do that.
No.
Now all the parking spaces at school taken, Andrew, where you go to school? Practically every kid there has a car.
And it was so simple. We could, if we went to a church function or something in the evening, my folks didn't worry about me walking home by myself if I needed to. It just wasn't any worry then.
And it was true that people didn't really lock their doors until they closed in for the night.
Well,
And
I didn't lock
sometimes
my
even
doors
then.
about 2 or 3 years ago before I began locking my doors. And I was getting sort of blind then, and
Somebody walked
got
in.
robbed.
Oh.
A guy came in, and my door was never locked, so he came in, and I was expecting my friends to come in at any time anyway. So he came in, began looking for a purse, and got hold of my arm, wouldn't let me go, and I tried to reach my telephone, and he yanked the card out of that, so I couldn't call anybody. He finally found a little money in my wallet, and took off. Said he had to have money to buy gas. He held on to me and didn't let me get away from him. By the time I got to the door, while he was outside, I don't know where he went to.
Oh, she's so witty. He saw some she keeps dollar bills up there to give to the Meals on Wheels. And he saw that, and he reached up to get them. He says, "You're not going to take my money from Meals on Wheels, are you?" And he said, "Well, how much do you need?" And she told him how much they cost, and he put part of them back.
In my wallet, he got about $30 out of that, and then he saw the money sticking in a cup there in a shelf up for Meals on Wheels. And he said, "How much did they cost?" And he put $2 bills back in there for me to pay for another meal.
Did you tell him that you really couldn't identify him, so that there was no need for him to be worried?
I said, "You don't want to rob a 100-year-old woman." I said, "I'm going to soon be 100. And I said, "I'm nearly blind." I said, "You wouldn't rob me." But he kept leading me around trying to find a place to find the her wallet.
Did he knock on your door first?
No, the door wasn't open.
It
was open.
Oh. So he probably knew that your door was not locked.
He probably cased the joint,
He probably was somebody here in the neighborhood.
Yeah, he knew that everybody in this neighborhood was working but me, and I was too old.
Oh.
He probably knew about that.
And was standing beside you before you knew he was even here?
Yeah, after they brought some pictures down a day or two later, they took another guy that a robbery similar to mine and wanted me to identify him. I said, "That looks like the size and shape of this guy," but I said I couldn't identify it at all because I can't see that well. But I don't know if they ever found him or not.
We've convinced her to lock her door now.
Yes.
But back then, we never locked our door. Didn't even think about
Broken
it.
Arrows didn't used to have to lock their doors.
And people even slept out at night sometimes in the summertime.
Yeah.
No air conditioning, that hadn't come around yet, so we would sleep out on the grass sometimes, especially on the porch. Different time.
Yes.
Things were different. I was trying to tell my children one time, and they get tired of hearing it, that they don't want to hear it till they're older. But I was talking about how I drew water out of a well after I was married and heated it over the fire in a kettle outside, and the rubbing and so forth. One of my sons-in-law says, "Well, Blanche, didn't everybody else around you do the same thing?" And I thought, that's right. So I decided I'd quit trying to impress them and wait till they were ready to hear it. because that was just the way of the times. It wasn't anything different for me.
Yeah, it wasn't as though you had to do this and everybody else had electricity and
No,
a washer and a dryer and a dishwasher.
we all did it.
We all did it. Even I did this sometimes when we lived on the farm. I washed clothes on the rub board.
It was kind of fun.
It was, and also the pace of life. You didn't have to rush from that to something else.
How did we have time for that?
I think my own personal philosophy is that the more time-saving devices you have, the less time you have.
That's right.
Because you're pushed to do everything quicker, and you're pushed to do more things. When you only had the simple way to do things, then you weren't expected to do a dozen things a day, or to be involved in so many things.
We used to have to milk a cow and churn the milk to get the butter, and hang the milk up to get cottage cheese and so forth. Now we just go and buy it. I told my grandson the other day, I said, there was a time when we had to wring the chicken's neck and pluck it, cut it up and cook it then we're going all the cycles up there. Now you go to the deli and buy it all ready to put in your mouth. It's just...
And we had meals on time.
Yeah, we did.
We weren't late getting our lunch or our dinner.
Everything was gathered from the garden and gotten ready, and we had meals, and everybody sat down at the table to eat.
Together.
Right. If they didn't eat, that's the only time they were going to get it. There was no place to run out.
I want to see how close we're getting. Let me see. May I? I'd like to get a little closer on each one as they talk, Andrew. When one person is talking, go way in so that the face takes up the whole screen. Zoom that far in. Okay? Where did you live in Broken Arrow? Do you remember the address?
In Broken Arrow?
Uh-huh.
Well, the first 2 or 3 years we were just on short jobs out of town, and we rented our apartments. We had...
Do you know where they were?
Well, yes, one was over here where Christian Funeral Home is, and Mrs. Stats was the lady we rented from there.
Okay, is that Broadway?
SG, huh?
Is that on Broadway?
Yes, and it was the second house from the corner.
And who owned it?
Well, Mrs. Stats, S-T-A-A-T-S, and she was a widow woman, an older woman, and she quilted. And then the people next to her on the corner, those two houses have been changed into the funeral home now. That was Mr. Wells lived there, and they were just retired people. And then we had an apartment in this second house from the corner, and that's all. Those two houses have been made into the funeral home.
Right.
And
You mentioned Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Was he related to Helen Gaddy Wells? Did you know Helen Gaddy Wells?
Yes, Helen. I don't believe I knew her. It was that they had a daughter and they had a son, and they were not home, of course. And their son was a mail carrier, I believe. And Mr. Wells was retired. He's an older man.
Okay.
I think I remember Helen.
I did not grow up in Broken Arrow. This is why I really hoped Bob would come with me today, because he would know the people to ask.
Oh, are you from Tulsa?
I've lived all my life in Tulsa. Okay, do you remember, did you do banking in Broken Arrow?
Yes.
Do you remember which bank?
Huh?
Do you remember which bank?
First National.
Oh, at First National. And did Mr. Graham, Scotty Graham's father, did he own it at that time?
No, that was the other Grahams. When we came here, Scott told me one time he's trying to buy this house for some reason, and he said I said when I came here, my husband was the only Graham listed in the telephone book. He said there sure is a passel of us now, a lot of Grahams.
Yeah.
And Laura Grahams came in, but Mr. Hurd was president of the bank at that
Fitz
time.
Hurd. Okay. Okay. How long was it before Scotty Graham's father owned the bank? Do you remember?
For who?
Before Scotty Graham's father owned that bank.
It was, I don't remember how many, several years old.
Okay. Did you bank at
First National?
Did you bank here before you got married? And
No,
left?
not until after 31 when we moved here. And then we were after we came back from Panama, as I said, our daughter was in college in Telequal, but she didn't. We took her down there and didn't let her finish. She was going to come back and finish, but she got a job down there, and then she got married in Panama. So anyway, then we worked at different places, still with the engineers at Altus, and then in a couple of stations in Arkansas. Worked out of the air bases on construction work, and two stations in Louisiana, and we retired in '58. Came back here then to stay in 50.
So you came back in '58 and you've been here ever since?
Been here. Well, we came to visit. We were here, didn't settle for a little while for sure where we was going to stay, so we decided we'd stay here because my mother lived here and his mother was dead. So we moved into this place in 1960 and worked it over in this one house. And he had a heart attack in '63 and died.
Mm.
So I've been sitting here alone since '63.
But you've lived in this place for 40 years, roughly.
Yeah. That's right.
So all right, you have 6 children. How many children did you have married?
I had 2.
You had a son and a daughter.
I had twins,
all right.
A daughter and a son, and the daughter is living with a son. Her husband died in '63 also, soon after her father died. He died of cancer, her husband did, and so then my son just died in '95. And his wife died 2 years before that, in Louisiana.
In Louisiana? Where does your daughter live?
My daughter lives, right now she lives since she retired, she worked for several years after her husband died, and she lives in Columbia, South Carolina, with one of her daughters.
Oh.
And she's not very well. So anyway, then my son, he had lived, his children mostly grew up in Louisiana. He had 3 children. There's still 3 children living there, but the parents are both dead. But they lived in Lafayette for several years, so thought they'd go back there and retire, but they went to Florida for a few years. Her parents got sick, and they need to go help them, be with them at the last. And then his wife got sick down there and died in Florida, so he died then a couple of years later. So I have 1 daughter and 6 grandchildren, and 15 great-grands, and 1 great-great.
Oh, a daughter, granddaughter, or a great-great-grandson?
My great-granddaughter has a little son, just 2 months old now. He lives in Alabama.
When you moved here, and you said '58, in this house in '60, were all these houses here?
Yes.
Okay, so this was the established neighborhood in Broken Arrow, wasn't it?
And all those people, everybody that lived in those houses over there have died, all in that block. The one on the corner might not, across the street. Then there was 2 houses east here, in the east part of this block, and they took them out to build the library. And Ms. Walker lived next door to me over on my west, and she died a couple of years ago.
Vida Walker?
Yeah, she lived there when I moved here.
These lots are big.
And Mr. Key lived in that house. He died about 3 years ago. In the square house next to that, it was Benedict's lived in that one when we moved here. And Ms. Wilson, I think that was a florist shop in that house when we first, about the time we moved here, but Mrs. L.G. Wilson moved in there and lived there just a few years ago. She passed away.
Yeah, that was Bob's aunt. Okay, you have a 3rd sister. Now, where is she?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay, and she's between the 2 of you then?
No, she's younger than her.
Oh, I thought you were the youngest.
I was born in '99, and she was born in 13 or 12.
12.
And my other sister 21 in 1921.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well, she was born 1920.
Betty's born 1920, yes, that's right.
Says the Depression didn't hit the family too badly.
Well, I don't think so. I guess I just passed through it.
Our parents were just so good at managing. They did all sorts of things on the side that while I was in high school, that when I think back, I think, how did they do that? Because while I'd be at school, while they might go out and pay for somebody's house, or my mother would sell Avon, and my dad would dig. If we had a snowstorm, he'd manage to bring home some boots for us to wear to school, the 3 of us that were still in school. And they were good managers, and they didn't let us know that we didn't have anything, and we didn't expect anything.
I was in the way.
We just never thought about about asking for money, you know. Just
What, you raised your own vegetables? Did you have a vegetable garden?
well,
Yes.
you know, back then when we moved here, Broken Arrow could still
We
have
did when I was growing up.
we could still have a cow behind the house. So we had our cow and the chickens and the vegetable garden, and we did well.
Mm-hmm.
We never starved. My mother could take slices of salt pork and make a Sunday dinner out of it. She knew how to soak it overnight and to bread it and cook it, you know, and just wonderful meals. I still remember the flavors of them.
Mm-hmm.
So she was a good manager.
Do you consider yourselves good cooks?
She is. She was.
Are you a good cook?
I don't know.
Mary always was a wonderful cook, and my mother was a marvelous cook. I enjoyed cooking for my family, but I wasn't really a good cook. I did things I knew how to do, and I didn't reach out like my mother did.
Mm-hmm.
She could take sheep charl and make a pie out of it.
Sheep what?
Sheep charl. you know
It's
what?
isn't it spelled S-O-R-R-E-L?
I don't know how
I
you
think.
spell it.
What is that?
It's a little weed, looks like clover, sort of.
You go out in the
Oh,
woods.
sure. It has
You
a
go out
tangy
It has a
taste.
tangy taste, and you pick it up and eat it, you know, just for the fun
Yes.
of it. Well, one day she just decided she could make a pie out of it, so she went out and gathered enough and cooked it, and the filling was a pinkish color. But she could just take anything and make a good meal out of it. My mother was really something else.
Our parents were both teachers before they married. Mother never taught after she married.
Mm-hmm.
She raised us as kids.
Yeah.
And I was a teacher for a short few years, and then worked in a bank for a few years off and on, different places where we moved to.
Did we talk about your being a teacher?
No.
Where did you teach?
Well, I taught little rural schools in Arkansas.
That
Oh,
long
uh-huh.
ago, they were all little
Yes.
schools.
Yes.
Then I didn't teach very long, about 3 years, so I decided that wasn't what I was cut out to do. Too many big kids I couldn't whip.
Because you taught the whole range from kindergarten to 8th
Yes,
grade or
yes,
9th
then you
grade.
did.
Then our parents decided we didn't be teachers. Joe was a teacher, and Carl and Blanch,
Hmm.
and I guess that's all of us that taught school.
Mm-hmm. Your other sister, what did she do? Did she work as she was when your other sister?
Oh,
She married a minister, and she's made a wonderful minister's wife. He was a minister of the same church for about 53 years, and
Same congregation? Oh, that's unusual.
and she's lost him a couple of years ago, but just made a wonderful helpmate for him.
Hmm.
So she didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
She did some while she went to college, but not afterwards.
Hmm. What is your philosophy about life, Mary?
well, just treat your fellow man right, have friends all around you. Yes.
Mary's the type that reaches out to people. I tell people she's the glue that has held our family together.
Mm.
She's the one that keeps in close contact with cousins and nieces and nephews from our that's spread out all over everywhere, you know. And she remembers everything about every one of them.
Oh. You stay in contact with your nieces and nephews? What about
At least one in every family I keep contact with.
What about your great nieces and nephews?
Well, they're too young and too busy to bother with.
Okay. So the ones that you stay in contact with do answer back letters?
Yes, I've been more in contact with more of my sister's children than I have my brother's children.
She's a telephone now.
For so long,
okay.
I used to live in this area, and I was in this area, get to be with them more, and they just grew closer to them, I guess, than my other nieces and nephews.
And the great nieces and nephews are off doing their thing.
They're just off doing their thing.
My grandchildren, especially the ones in this area, they think they belong to her, I think, more than they do to me. But then my family's so large that they all love her, but they don't keep in contact with her like the older ones do, like my children do.
Mm-hmm.
But My family's a lot bigger than hers.
Yes, with 6 children, and then married, and then grandchildren, and
And great-grandchildren.
it'd be 3 times as many as 2. 2 children. Well, then you do have grandchildren. You do have grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and you said a great-great.
And one great-great.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had 15 great-grandchildren and 6 grandchildren. Each one of my children had 3 children, and then they multiplied from there.
What do you, and again, this is kind of a leading question for both of you. If you reach out and make contact, and they don't want contact, then what keeps you from wanting to just say, well, okay, that's all, that's okay. No, what's the word? What keeps you from being angry?
We don't have to
Don't
worry
have time.
about that.
You don't have time?
No, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have anybody that's ever made us feel that way. Actually, we have a very loving family. I can be away from one of them for a year or longer, and suddenly they show up. It's just like they've never been gone.
She has a son in Paris. His family in Paris, been there for several years.
Over there.
Oh, they are?
And they can walk into my house, and after the greetings are over, it's just, they're just there. It's just like they've not been gone.
Oh.
Everybody just seems to fit in.
Uh-huh.
And we saw a lot at Mary's birthday party that we hadn't seen for a long time. And it was just good to sit down and talk with them, you know. We don't have that feeling you're describing.
Uh-huh.
Not with any of them.
So it must come from your own giving out, and you don't even recognize it if you are not well received.
Mm-mm. No, if we're not well received,
You don't know it.
We don't know it. No, we really don't. And they always act like they're glad to see us.
Uh-huh. What do you think about how government, how local and state and national government has changed in the last, say, 50 or 60 years?
It's been changing all these years.
Did you see a trend at any time in the last 30 or 40 years that...
Well, I remember way back there, we're complaining about the ones that's in power now, things they're doing that we shouldn't do, that they shouldn't do. And so our father was a representative from Marion County for just one term, and he was a good Christian man, and he thought he could change some of their ideas down in the state legislature, so he stayed one term. He didn't want it anymore. He said they already had their minds made up. He couldn't change it about it. So he didn't go back anymore, didn't try to get it. It wasn't in politics. He wasn't cut out for that.
Mm-hmm.
My grandchildren, if they have a chance to go to Little Rock, they like to go in and find his picture.
Mm-hmm.
But I never did get into politics that much, and I worry about some of the things I read if I listen too close. And like she said, it's always going on. And my family kept me so busy that I just didn't worry too much. My father used to say, you can support whoever you want before they're elected. But after your president is elected, he's your president, and then you're supposed to support him. And of course, if we want to get bitter and critical, well, sometimes they do something that's a little bit hard to support. That I noticed since I've grown older. But when I was younger, why, I didn't think about that at all. It was our president, and that was it. But now then, since I'm older, and so we didn't have newspapers to tell us every time they turned around. And we didn't know all the things that went on. And radio, see, I've gone from no radio up to having it right in the house, you know. So it's for me, it's a big change, because I know so much more about what's going on now. And when I was younger, I didn't know what was going on.
There are advantages not to know, aren't there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there really is. I never believed that they could come right into my house and I could look at them sitting in my chair. Even when I read that television had come out, I didn't believe it. The first radio that came to our town was a little set that we had to put earphones on to listen to.
You remember when that was?
It was in the early 20s, maybe, might have been 24, 25, I don't remember for sure.
And it belonged to someone else?
Yeah, everybody wanted to go visit them to listen to the radio.
And only one person at a time could listen to it?
And it sounded like static, but everybody was so excited. It wasn't clear at all. You want to know when I saw my first airplane?
Yeah.
The year before we came to Oklahoma, that was our last school year there, 25 and 26. We were, at that time, we'd grown to have a 3-room schoolhouse there at Pyatt. And we had to send somebody down the hill to a spring to get water for the children to drink. And so one of the boys in my class got permission to get out of class and go get the water. In a little bit he came back and he stood there in the door just as white as a sheet. And they didn't have the water. And he was pointing up. And finally he stuttered out something, so we all ran outside and there was a plane circling over our schoolhouse. And that was the first plane any of us had ever seen.
Had he not even heard about airplanes?
I don't remember the story. That's all I remember about that particular
You knew that
thing.
you knew there were airplanes, but
Yeah,
you had not
we
seen
knew,
one.
but we had never seen one. And then I think quite often, this is interesting, Wiley Post, you know who Wiley Post is? His brother was my penmanship teacher at Pryor, and his sister was my English teacher. And I know from reading that Wiley Post did a lot of barnstorming, as they called it, go to towns. Well, one time somebody came, and I've wondered ever since who that was. Could that have been Wiley Post? Because he was doing that at that time. Came to Broken Arrow, and my younger brother was selling newspapers, and he saved up enough money he decided he could afford to buy me a ticket to ride the airplane. And I got to ride that barnstorming little bitty airplane from Broken Arrow up over Tulsa and back.
How old were you?
By that time I was grown. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but I was still here. That was before I finished school.
And you weren't frightened to get up in the air?
No, it was exciting. The wind blowing my hair, you know, and just you just take one at a time up. A little bitty plane.
I heard you say that Wiley Post's brother and sister both taught school in Pryor. You remember their names?
James A. Post was his brother, and his sister's name, her married name was Stafford. I'm not sure if it was Elizabeth or not, but I can't remember right now what the first name was, but her married name was Stafford.
Do you remember when you first saw an airplane, Mary? Do you remember when you saw your first airplane?
Yes, it was at Marshall, Arkansas. I was visiting some of my relatives down there. And I don't know, I guess the first plane ride I rode it as she came out here. I was out here visiting my folks, and one of my brothers gave me a plane ride over Tulsa for my birthday. I don't remember how old I was, probably in early 30s, I guess, when I first saw a long plane.
You've been on a lot of planes since, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been several.
I'd like to know what the attitude of school children were that you taught, both of you.
Well, when my kids were still to school, there was not enough outside things to worry for them to worry about, like drugs and stuff like that. And I don't think I ever had that along in when they were growing up. Now there's so many temptations for school children. It's wonder they all get grown.
Did you have behavior problems with some of the students?
Not very much. Very little. I think maybe the parents were tighter on them at that time. They grew up knowing what was expected of them, and most of them most of them that I knew tried to please their parents.
Mm-hmm. Did you teach, you said you taught about 3 years and you
Yeah.
taught all grades?
I taught grade
All grades.
in the little one rooms
Right.
at school 2 years, and then I taught 1 year 3rd grade at PIAD.
Mm-hmm. When, Blanche, when you were teaching in the last half of your teaching career with high school math,
Mm-hmm.
did you notice a difference between the behavior of the earlier grades that you taught and the high school grades? I mean, did you prefer teaching high school students?
The only times after we finally got settled into teaching, and my husband was superintendent, and I just taught math. He let me teach 5th grade class a couple of years, and I loved teaching 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
But he needed me to teach high school math. The high school math teachers were a little harder to get, so that's primarily what I did. And I did notice a change in the students. Luckily, we retired just before the big things started happening.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one day, especially when I felt like a couple of my students had gotten on some drugs while they were downtown,
Mm-hmm.
but we seemed to have gotten through that okay. And discipline, I never did really have that much problem with them. For some reason, my husband demanded great respect from the kids. They liked him, but he could just walk into a room and stand there and look at them. I mean, everybody straightened up for the next month. And it wasn't that he whipped them or punished them, but for some reason they respected him, so I felt real fortunate in that.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have very much discipline problems.
Mm-hmm.
But the time when he died in '75, shortly after we retired, and I moved over to Midwest City to be close to my daughters, why I started hearing things there in the city that I thought, I guess I retired just in time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we really never did have very much
Mm-hmm.
discipline problems.
Mm-hmm.
We lived through the polio years. That was a sad time for us. About 4 of my children were hit during that time. And one of them was left with an impaired right leg.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of years after that, when the vaccine came out, and I used to think, why couldn't it have come earlier?
Mm-hmm.
So
You're talking about students, not your own children.
my own children.
Your own
We
children.
had an epidemic in the Alva
Mhm.
area, and there was 14 in our school that
Mhm.
was hit,
Mm-hmm.
and Patsy was hit the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to use the Sister Kenny system on her. She was just about 3 years old, and she screamed so hard when they give her those hot baths.
Mm-hmm.
But that's
You're saying this was your own daughter?
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
right.
Mm-hmm. I have a sister who was struck by polio when she was 15, and her leg is crippled. And she became a registered nurse and spent a lot of time on her feet, and the other leg, she overused it, so she's having trouble with it. She's had to have
Patsy's
surgery.
having
Yeah.
problems with hers.
Yeah.
But what she lost in her legs must have given her strength in her hands, and so she's made her life busy with using her hands,
Mm-hmm.
every kind of craft imaginable.
Mm-hmm.
So she's been happy through it.
Mhm.
She was a good little trooper.
Mm-hmm. I've got 3 pictures here that the 3 generations, the Ledbetter girls, their mother and their children. And I want to show it, Andrew, but I also want to show this picture and ask Mary about this picture.
There's a bigger picture of it over there on the wall.
Okay.
I love that picture of
I do
her.
too.
That's before she was married, and I thought she was the prettiest sister anybody ever had.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
That's like this one.
Yeah, but the one with the dress, the pretty
Oh.
dress,
Uh-huh.
was that your wedding dress?
No.
No,
Oh, okay.
No, this
it's a
is
pretty dress my mama made for me.
I want you to show these up close, Andrew. Tell me if I've got them. Pan from here to here to here. Okay, stay on this picture a minute. Standing from left to right are Betty Rose Sensenbaugh, Lily Bell Ledbetter, Mary Graham, and Blanch Horn, holding Penny Horn, Stockstill. The girls standing are Glenda Horn, Donor, and Judy Horn, Pixley. Okay, Lily Bell Ledbetter was your mother?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mary Nell then was your grandmother.
Mary Pell was
Mary Pell was my grandmother.
Mary Pell was your grandmother. Mary Pell Wright. Okay. Now this picture on the right of her standing there, that dress, all dressed up in a fancy frock, is Mary Ledbetter before her marriage. And so I thought that was maybe your wedding dress.
No, it wasn't.
But this is a dress that her mother made her. Not her wedding dress, just a beautiful dress. Would that have been your high school graduation?
No,
maybe.
it's just a dress-up dress.
Oh, it's so pretty.
Just a dress-up dress.
I wish I had a picture of me that she made a pretty dress out of blue silk for me, and Patsy got a hold of it, and she blew it up trying to see what all the insertions and the lace that was in it, and she made me a doll, porcelain doll, and made the dress almost identical to the one that my mother had made, and gave it to me for my birthday.
Oh my! Are you a doll collector?
No, it looks like I am now because she's making dolls, and she brings them to my house to visit me, so I've got several over there now.
The lower picture here, Mary Ledbetter at the piano. She's in a kind of a fancy apron.
Oh, we wore aprons in those days.
Yeah.
She probably was playing between fixing a meal.
Yeah,
or something.
right. Did you read music or did you play by ear?
No, I read music.
Did you?
And she taught music.
Oh, you did. You teach piano?
Yes.
beginners.
Do you still play the piano today?
No, I don't have one. It got away from me. When I get close to one, I still play some.
Oh, it's too bad you don't have
Anytime
one.
she gets close to my piano where she sits down and plays some.
Do you play the piano also?
No.
Oh,
No,
got the
she's
piano?
a smart one. I got the piano for my 5 girls.
Oh, uh-huh.
We moved this little town. There's no music teacher there, and we'd have one come in. Mama would give them board and room for my lessons, and they'd get a class to give lessons to their other children in the homes that had pianos. And that's all the lessons I ever got was like that, just a few months at a time.
But
And
you
I
learned
had-
to read music, just those kind. But you learned to read music, those kinds of
yes.
lessons.
Yes,
uh-huh.
Mother could read music, but she said she couldn't play. She never did play, but she could read music, and so anyway, she kept us children in our yards to play, and when they wanted me to play, well, they had to come to our yard, and if it was time for me to practice, well, she would lock the door so they couldn't get in to bother me.
You know what shaped notes are?
Yes.
Our father had a nice voice, and he would sing from the shaped notes.
Yes.
And sometimes would even teach singing classes.
Is that right? Uh-huh. Did I hear you say you had 5 girls?
Mhm.
5 girls and 1 boy?
And the baby
Oh.
was finally a boy.
Was he called Junior? Did you name him
Uh-huh.
Junior?
Oh, yes. We thought the first one was going to be a boy. We expected it, like you always
Yeah.
do. And my husband's name was Kermit Glenn. So he teased me. He said he was going to name her Kermita Glendola. But anyway, we compromised. I said, well, we can call her Glenda. And so he decided he could put my name with it, so she's Glenda Blanch.
Oh, good.
So each time he thought he was going to have a boy. When Judy was born, I thought I was in labor. I came over to visit Mama, and I thought maybe she was coming a little bit early, so we called Dr. Franklin, and he came down, and he said yes, he thought I needed to get to the hospital to show how times had changed. He took me with him back to the hospital. In fact, when I hurt my knee playing basketball in high school, he walked to the house to check my knee.
He walked to your house
Mhm.
to look at
To
your
check my
knee.
knee.
Mm-hmm.
He walked, a lot of his calls were
Mhm.
walking.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember Dr. Franklin, Mary?
Oh, yes.
He was our doctor and her mother's doctor for years, but he died before she left, I guess. Our mother died in '65. Dr. Newland had come here at that time, so he was her doctor. But Dr. Franklin was the first family doctor for all of them that came here from
He
me too.
delivered 2 of my girls.
He did. Probably charged about $30.
I have no idea. The first one was born in Muskogee, and she had to stay in the hospital for 5 weeks because she was premature. And I think that bill was probably about $45 total. The baby, they charged $1 a day for.
Oh. Okay, now he didn't deliver your first one though.
No.
Okay.
No, and I just happened to get
Yeah.
caught here with the second one, and I came on purpose with the third one.
Okay.
And that was during wartime, and he was getting tired. He was very tired when Penny was born.
Did you like him a lot?
Oh yes.
I have heard people say that sometimes he could be very short, to the point, but there wasn't well, he did what was necessary to do. And I suppose when he was to the point and maybe even a little abrupt, it's because he had to rush on somewhere else.
I don't remember him ever losing his patience that I ever thought he did, but one time had a little bit of problem when Penny was born, and maybe he hurried that up a little bit, but anyway, she cried a lot afterwards. And I remember him going down the hall saying, why doesn't somebody make that baby shut up? But that's the only time, and I could understand that because that was a hard time. It was a hard time then. And the war was just really...
That was the middle of the war?
Yeah, it was November 1942.
Okay.
And, but I don't remember him ever being short with us. He was nice to Mama, and he was good to all of us. Like Dr.
He was still the only doctor at that time
At
in
that
Broken
time.
Arrow. And that was his medical hospital even, wasn't it? Was it one that he and his son established, or just he established and then later on his son came along? And
his son came along later.
Later.
I don't know what age his son was, if he had become a doctor by that time or not. I never did know his son.
All right.
This was the earlier days that I'm remembering.
I'm trying to think of his son's name, Dr. Onis Franklin
Ewing.
and Ewing.
I think.
That you're right. I've heard so much about all these people from Bob and his parents, and I believe Ewing would be about maybe 85 now. So in 43,
Oh, then
He might have been in the war.
close to my age, because I'm 87. So he could have been a doctor there at that time, but I don't remember him. I just remember Dr.
I know he was in the war as a surgeon. Probably was, and that might have been part of the pressure on Dr. Franklin if his
could
son
have
was in the
been.
war.
I wasn't living here, so I wasn't keeping up with him. The stores are all so different now. When you think about how we used to go to the grocery store and stand, had a counter we had to stand in front of, and the groceries were all back behind, and you'd give your order and they would list the things down and put on the counter and add it up for us, you know. So we've gone from that to rushing through the supermarket and getting what you want. And there wasn't an awful lot of ready-to-wear. I worked in the ready-to-wear one of my sessions home from school. Sometimes one of them I worked down in the piece goods, and another time I worked upstairs in the ready-to-wear. But it's mostly piece goods that people was buying at that time because they were still sewing.
Did you sew?
Not very much. My mother and my sister spoiled me. They did, you know, if somebody else will do it for you, you don't do it. And they started dressing my babies from the time Glenda, the first one, was born. And they kept them well dressed.
So you're a seamstress,
Oh,
Mary.
yes.
You're a seamstress?
Uh-huh. So from my family.
Uh-huh.
And my family.
Well, you're part of my family.
What were your hobbies, Mary?
Well, I don't know what was my hobby.
Sewing would have been a hobby and also a necessity,
A few
maybe.
years there I did some painting and
Picture painting?
stencil painting,
Yeah.
stencils for on clothes and on shirts and
Oh.
pillows and things like that.
Do you have any of that?
No, all wore out.
I
Made them
have-
to use.
I have a quilt that she painted. My mother made the piece of blocks, and then you know how you set them together with another block.
Mhm.
Mary painted the pictures on that. And I have a pillowcase that's been turned into a pillowcase doll that she painted on.
Mhm.
She did beautiful smocking and little rosebud
Oh, yes. My mother did that.
embroidery, and
Uh-huh.
she's done a variety of things. She made the communion bread for the church for many years.
Would that have been without leavening?
Mhm.
You made a bread that didn't have any leavening in it?
For the communion bread.
Communion?
Yeah, I made communion bread.
Uh-huh. Was it flat?
It's just a little bit of shortening in the water and flour.
Oh.
Did it have shortening in it?
A little bit of shortening.
Sort of like a pie crust then, wasn't it?
Not tender like pie crust. It's
Oh.
a little tougher than
Very
that.
Tougher.
firm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I made communion bread for several years. When our first Northside Christian Church was out there, first got out there, we didn't have a very big crowd, and so we'd take turns making it every week or two. And
Uh-huh.
so then I had these three of us that made it a lot, and the other two passed away, and I was left, and I never did get another helper. So I did it for several years by myself. And,
So you made it every week, or would you make it 2 or 3
I'd make
weeks
it
at
up
a
for 2 or 3
time?
weeks at a time,
Yeah.
and put it in little plastic boxes and put it in the freezer out there.
You
And
can
then when
score that, you know, every little tiny square was the same size.
Oh.
They've just recently gone to commercial out there. They wanted to go commercial 2 or 3 different times while I was making. They'd say, well, is that hard to make it? I said, no, as long as I can make it, I'll be it. So anyway, finally so I couldn't see how to make my lines straight across there, and I said, you have to get somebody else. So it took a long time to get somebody else to want to do it. So came down, the two young women came and learned how to make it about 4 or 5 years ago before I got so blind. I was getting pretty blind then. And they made it under my directions here, and then put it in the oven. They had to go take care of their children in school. Said, now let us know when you want us to do it. I said, this is not my job anymore. It's your job. That's what you learned. that's what you came to learn to do it. So I can't see to do it anymore. So they took it over, and they've been doing it for a few years now. Just a week or two ago, they told me they had gone to commercial bread out there.
A little tiny, tiny.
Some of the other churches here did it too, but when I first began going to church way back there, they'd have a big piece of bread on the plate they pass, and you pinch off, you break off your little bite. But then we marked it so it would break easily, as little tiny squares.
What were your hobbies?
Raising my family and teaching school. In the later years, I've done a great deal of crocheting, especially Athens. I made Athens for most of my big family. I haven't gotten to the great-grandchildren, but I've gone through the grandchildren. And
I've made a lot of
many
Africans the
friends.
last few years for all my grandchildren.
Have you?
Can't seem to do it anymore though.
And I love to read. So
Our mother crocheted 2 bedspreads, size for a big bed, and with the words, it's called filet crochet. The letters, all of the large prayer was in 2 different ones she made like that.
that was beautiful.
Our Father who art in heaven, all
Yes.
prayer. And
Where are they?
well, I guess Betty has one and Carl has one. My brother died, but anyway, I think Betty hangs hers part of the time on a hanger, doesn't she? On a curtain rod or something, and over a colored.
I forgot the name of Carl's after he died. And she crocheted other bedspreads too, but that was on
Yeah,
it.
she made silver bedspreads,
The whole Lord's Prayer. Wow.
just different patterns.
And she would make runners about so long, saying "Happy Birthday, Glenda," or "Happy Birthday, Judy." You know,
Oh
she wrote
my
things like
goodness.
that. I'm not that. This is about as big as any fillet that I've done. I thought I would get into it just because my mama did.
Seeing if she could do it again.
I never did use that fine a thread I crocheted.
But
God is
this,
alive.
this is,
And
this
big
is what,
threads.
her thread was finer than this, and it was, you know, big enough for a big bed. So she really went all out. But a few years ago, I thought, I've never done that, and if my mama did it, surely I can. So I've managed to make doilies and these until I got handed around to all the family. And then I quit.
That'd be quite a project to do a bedspread.
This is simple. This didn't take long to do it.
This African back here, this is a pattern that I use the most of different
Yeah.
colors.
Yeah, that's a real popular
I didn't do that
pattern.
when my sister-in-law
That's
made
the
that one for
easiest
my birthday
one.
last year.
Actually, it's the most practical one. Some of the fancier ones that we've tried, the children get their toes in the stitches, and this is more practical.
And who made this one?
A sister-in-law.
So this is not Mary's, or it's not yours, but I want to show
No,
her. The colors are so
no, I
pretty.
didn't make it, but those colors
Do
are
you
pretty.
crochet?
No. Andrew's mother does, my daughter does, but yeah, that's beautiful. The colors are so pretty.
I guess I've made close to 50 of those.
Oh, you have.
But most of mine have been just one color, and I didn't have, that way I could go faster. I didn't have to change colors.
Yeah, I think that'd be
That
easier.
sister-in-law that made that one is 95.
Oh,
is she 95
my.
now? Yeah, she's 95, I guess.
I noticed that in your,
She still can see to crochet, but I can't.
Mary attributes her long life to living right and loving the Lord in all His goodness.
That's a pretty good
That's
idea.
a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that should be mine too.
Living right, you don't have to worry about a lot of things if you live right.
That's right.
And then if you love the Lord, you're only responding to His love anyway. So it sort of keeps the cycle going there, doesn't it?
Did you ever live in Broken Arrow?
Never did. No. We live now where Woodland Hills Mall is. You know where that is?
No.
You know where that is? Oh, okay. 71st and Memorial.
Yeah, I know
So
where
it's
that
right
is.
straight down 71st
yes,
to Memorial. And that's as close. We have a Broken Arrow telephone number, but we're in Tulsa. City limits is Tulsa. But of course Bob has lived. Bob says that he's never lived, except when he was in the Army on 2 different occasions. He's never lived nor worked more than a 12-mile radius from where he was born.
Well, I lived in the same place the place I grew up moved there when I was about 5, I think. From that time on till I married, I lived in that same town.
Mm-hmm.
We moved this little town when putting the railroad through there, the White River Division of Missouri Pacific. My father decided he was quit teaching and getting something else, so he was the first depot agent in that town and the first postmaster when the town got organized. We moved there when the town was starting up.
He was a postmaster. Now, is he the Is he the one that was in the legislature?
Yes.
Uh-huh. So your father was, are you on her? No. Your father was very active and
In church and civic works always.
And this is always this seems to be something that children kind of latch into, or at least, okay, so you married a man who was fairly active and adventuresome too.
Yeah.
So do girls look for the kind of father they have? They do. I mean, that's the pattern, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We moved to this little town. There's several different denominations. Well, many people there, but each one for a while church had enough to hire a preacher, so different preachers would use the same. Have Christian church one Sunday of the month, and Baptist one, and Methodist like that. And take turns with using this one church house till we got a little more built up there.
Did they all go to the church the same
Yeah.
Sunday, or did the Christians
Yeah,
go
they
one
went
Sunday?
to each other's church.
Okay.
My father was superintendent of the Sunday school, just had one Sunday school, and he was superintendent for years and years there.
Postmaster and superintendent of the Sunday school.
I've been trying to remember where the theater was in Broken Arrow. I remember going to sing silent movies here at Broken Arrow.
You do?
And I can't remember where the theater was.
Do you remember what the name of it was?
No, I remember the name of the movie. The first movie I saw at that theater was Ramona.
Yeah.
And
Silent movie?
Silent movie. And it was so fascinating to have a pianist playing the piano down in front of this silent movie going on. And they could pick up the pace of the movie. They must have had a score, but they would change. If something exciting was happening, they'd play exciting music. Something quiet, they'd slow down. But their music always exactly fit the movie.
Was it the same pianist each time?
I didn't go that many times.
Oh, okay.
Then later we had one. There's not one in Broken Arrow now. Later we had
Is there
one
no
there
movie in
on
downtown?
Main.
Downtown there isn't, right?
There is one in town.
Not downtown. Not on Main Street.
I'm after the talking movies came out. I remember going a few times, but I never went very much.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first talking movie I went to.
What was it?
I don't remember the name of it, but it's one that's been made over and over. This poor woman works her heart out to send her daughter to a big school, and she doesn't let her know her daughter thinks she's rich, and the daughter is living real rich. She doesn't find out that her mother had worked that hard until later on, you know.
Do you remember who the actresses were?
I could if you hadn't asked me. But I was absolutely amazed to have those people talking up on the screen.
So you could get a lot out of a movie even though there was not dialogue in those silent movies.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Have you ever watched one?
Just little snippets on television.
I've tried so hard to get my grandchildren to watch The Sheik.
Yeah.
I really think all young people, I think you should watch The Sheik.
Is that Valentino was in it? Uh-huh. Why do you think so?
Because it would give them an insight as to how far the movies have come. The story is a good story, but they just don't want to wade through all that. But I think if they would watch that, they could get an idea of how far it has progressed.
You're talking about the technology?
The technology,
Mm-hmm.
Like having to use a fan to blow the sand on the desert and stuff like that. There's just no comparison to the techniques they used then and what they do now. And
especially when
I've gotten a few of them to watch it, but not very many.
Oh, do you have it?
I have.
You have a copy of it?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, my daughter ordered it for me for Christmas a couple of years ago.
And that is a silent movie.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember who the woman was in it? The girl?
I don't remember.
Didn't Valentino die young?
Pretty young, I think.
Uh-huh. You remember Rudolph Valentino, Mary?
Exactly.
Do you remember Rudolph Valentino?
Oh, yes, uh-huh.
Was he a real, was he the kind of movie hero that girls talked about like they do sometimes
Well, I think he was kind of blown up pretty big, but
was he? Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Brad Pitt is one of the big heartthrobs today. Was
Mhm.
Valentino that way then?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Was that called the Sheik or the Sheik of Araby?
Don't remember.
It seems to me like the first one was just called The Sheik.
Oh, okay.
I believe it is.
Okay.
But
Did he
I
have
couldn't
more
understand.
than one movie that he was a Sheik
I
in?
don't remember.
Okay.
I just wanted that one. In fact, she got me a couple of silent movies. In fact, you can rent silent movies at the
Oh.
video store. But that's one of the very earliest
Okay.
ones. And I think that's part of their education they're missing when they don't look into that.
Yeah, when you don't know how things were, you don't know
Yeah.
the right perspective, really.
I had one grandson yesterday that asked me, because, like I said, they're just not really to dig into the past, but he knew we'd been talking some about it, and he kiddingly says, "Grandmother, do you remember when there wasn't any computers?" Of course, he was teasing me because they are new, and he can remember when there wasn't
Yeah.
computers.
What do you think for your grandchildren and for your great-grandchildren, what do you feel a little sorry about that they are missing that
I think they're going to miss a lot of stuff that we learned growing up that they don't even know about now.
like what?
Well, they just, their schoolwork now, they got the computers, they don't have to even think and just learn which numbers to punch. Things like that. I think education is quite different
I
from
guess we're pretty
what it
smart
was
to
when I
do
went to
computer.
school. We knew
I do email, but I don't go much past that.
we knew our history and our states. In our states, we had to know all about our states and the county seats and name the counties and their county seats and a lot about our states and the history of our state when we were growing up more than we did the other stuff. I did, at least. I was more interested in what grew up close to me.
What I worry about is having so much technical stuff to look at that that they're missing a lot of being together. The television is on so much, and so many games and so many things to do that keeps them from thinking. I don't mean everybody, but some. Some children never pick up a book and read it. They'd rather see it on television, and they're missing out reading a good book and doing their own pictures in their mind, visualizing what's happening. I think that would make them think more if they could learn to read instead of just having to have it stuck in front of them all the time. And last night we had dinner at Penny's house, and it was so neat seeing all the young girls, the married girls, take over the kitchen. They just waited on us, and then when the dinner was over, they immediately started doing the dishes and got everything put away. And I thought, now that's the way it should be. But I've been to some homes where they get up and go somewhere else or go watch television instead of doing it. But I want them to be together more. I want them to love each other. I tell my family, I said, always remember we're family. We don't have to do the same things. You don't have to see each other real often, but know that when you do see them, you love them. And I think they do. That's one of my goals, is to keep my family loving each other.
Mary, do you get your fingernails done a lot?
No.
They sure look pretty.
Just lately they've been having some nails split.
Zero in on her hands.
One of her daughters.
Let's see your hands.
Aren't they painted my fingernails because they got some splits in there, getting them all broken off. So she said she'd paint them to quit breaking them.
Yeah, Penny takes good care of her. She fixes her hair and does her nails and helps her with her bath.
So Penny is here in Broken Arrow.
Yeah, that's her daughter. Her middle child. Middle daughter.
You have pretty hands.
She does have. She's a pretty Mary.
Yes, she is.
We're all proud of her.
Oh, I can tell. And you're blessed to have each other still at these ages. That has to be a special touch from the Lord.
It is.
Let's see if we have.
Yeah, our mother lived to be 90, and I thought, well, maybe I'd get to be 90, but when I got 90, I didn't stop. I just kept going on.
Okay, you've lost a son.
Yes.
Have you lost any of your children?
No, thank goodness.
Was your son's...
He was ill.
He was ill, okay. So evidently in your genetic makeup there is this
Could be.
this thing that says live long and well.
Healthy foods. My grandmother was 87 and a half when she passed away. Mother was 90. Her father had a heart attack when he was just 73, I believe.
So the women did a little better than the men.
Huh?
So the women so far have done a little better than the men.
That's right.
That's the way it's been in our family too. I think women maybe aren't subjected to the pressures of making a living, even though women work.
That's good.
But men have that ultimate responsibility, and sometimes it's a pressure that never lets up. Do we have family pictures there?
This is from her birthday party. I was trying to see if there was a good one
Mhm.
of my sister. This is the three sisters today.
Okay, this was October 15th of this year. There's Mary, there's Blanche, and Betty Rose.
Mhm.
Here they are again, looks like. Oh, look at this family picture. I remember in this article, Wanda Bowline is listed as a cousin, or second cousin.
Our first cousin.
Okay. And her maiden name was Ledbetter, right? Am I correct there?
Yeah, she was Ledbetter.
Okay. Ledbetter. I grew up in West Tulsa Nazarene Church, and there were some Ledbetters there, and that would have been 50 years ago. But of course, all Ledbetters weren't necessarily related to each other, were they?
I don't know.
What do you mean 50 years ago? You're not 50 now.
He knows better than that. I don't remember their first names. Ledbetter. I thought that's an intriguing name. Well, I think, unless, okay,
Is that going to be in a history book now?
it's going to be in our history video library, and I will get copies of it back to each of you. I'll give you a copy if you'd like.
I'd love to do that.
I'll bring it to Mary, or send it to Mary either by mail or have somebody bring it by. And the next time you're here, or I can mail it to you, whichever way you like. If you
I'd like you to
if you'll just give me your address then before we leave. I'd like to know, did you, were you aware of the train in town?
Well,
Oh, yes.
yeah, the trains we moved to this little town where they put to be on the railroad where they're going to have a depot there, and they got a little past our town. We could go up to another town or two on Sunday afternoon. That was a good pastime for my age group at that time. We'd go up, maybe ride 25 or 30 miles, and then catch the next train back. There'd just be one train each way for a few years. A day.
And so riding the train itself was a delightful.
Got to do that early on.
Okay, when you came to Broken Arrow, was that still going on? Did you get on the train then at any
We used to
time?
go to Tulsa on the train, and we come back on the was it freight train, or we came on the local.
Well, I just know the mail came twice a day, and it came only on the train.
Yeah,
And if you were really expecting something, would you go down to meet the train even?
Mm-hmm.
Would you? Was okay, what was the center of activity, basically speaking? The center of activity in Broken Arrow.
Well, I guess up here Main Street.
Main Street, and then the train was
from Broadway down 3 or 4 blocks.
okay.
And they had
On Saturday afternoons, was that a time that you remember going to town?
Yeah, a lot of people would come to town, and they had Rooster Day celebrations and Cotton Jubilee Day. First few years I lived here, had 2 celebrations a year.
2?
Cotton Jubilee in the fall when this cotton first began coming in, and they quit raising cotton here then a few years later.
Cotton Jubilee then was celebrating the cotton harvest?
Yeah, the cotton harvest, I guess.
Would that be on Main Street?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was there's 2 gins down here on this side of Main Street, this side of the railroad.
Okay.
And that was the 2
Do they
gins
still have prizes for the biggest rooster and the one that comes the farthest
Do they
away?
do that, Andrew, do you know, on Rooster Day? I don't know.
They were really innovative for
I don't think
Rooster
that's
Day.
part of Rooster Day now.
It's gotten so big, and, you know,
Commercial.
they have a little stand out in the front, and sometimes they judge the prettiest baby and stuff like that.
The last few years I've gone to the parade in the springtime. You just go up to Main Street and see it up here because it began just north of this grade school, and I just go up there and start. But I haven't been up the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Now. Can't see well enough to see the parade, to see what's on there.
They weren't very big in the early days. There wasn't that many people here really.
Right.
And the stores would do interesting things. For instance, there at Hunsaker's one year, summer when I was working there, I remember they put a block of ice in the window and let people guess when the last drop would melt, and they had some kind of a prize they
Yeah.
gave them for that. So I don't know. People would make up things for entertainment, and most of my social life was at church, of course, but it was picnics and swimming parties and stuff like that. But it was a simple life.
Well, Rooster Day now, they hire, you know, the
The
carnivals to come into town and set up. And instead of having the prettiest baby contest, they have a Miss Chick contest, which
Right.
is the prettiest 17 or 18-year-old, 16-year-old maybe.
It's really changed.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so big now, I don't even like to come over for it.
Yeah, it's like a county fair almost in a big city.
I think Broken Arrow had most of the population of 2,000 when we came here in 31. Now it's 65 or 70.
It is, yes. It's 65 or 70,000.
Penny's going to be disappointed if we don't tell you that she used to walk up to the ice cream store and get ice cream to take home, and they would put dry ice in it to keep it hard till she got it down to her granny's house, and my mother's house. She said, "Be sure and tell them about that."
You're talking about a cone of ice cream?
No, a little carton, so they could take it home and eat it.
And they would actually pack it in dry ice for
They
her.
put a little piece of dry ice in it and keep it cold,
Oh,
because the days were hot. No air conditioning, and you walked everywhere you went.
Sure. Yeah, and ice cream would have been melted walking even 3 or 4, well, even walking a block, it would have gotten soft.
That was long before 40-hour weeks even. After I was married, why men were glad to get a job for $1 a day, which went from sun up to sundown, and they were thankful to get the job.
Because $1 a day would buy a week's worth of groceries, wouldn't it?
Probably. You'd get a pound of coffee for 17 cents.
What is Penny's last name?
Stockstill.
Stockstill. Okay. Okay.
She
And she
did,
did go to
okay.
Broken Arrow High School.
No.
She did?
No, she just would come to see her granny, come to see my mother.
Okay.
No, none of my children went to Broken Arrow.
But your daughter did.
But Penny's husband taught here for many years.
Okay, that was the connection.
That's what you
All
were
right.
thinking.
Okay. But your daughter went to Broken Arrow. Did she finish at Broken Arrow High
Yes, she finished
School?
Broken Arrow and then went to Telequa a couple of years
Okay.
before we went to Panama.
All
And
right.
she got married and
Okay.
didn't go to school anymore.
Okay.
3 of us, my brother Leslie and Betty and I all finished high school here.
Oh, okay.
There was 44 in my graduating class
And you graduated what year?
in 1931.
31. And then your brother
Uh,
graduated when?
Leslie finished school here.
probably 33.
Okay.
No, 34.
Okay, and then the next one graduated when?
I have my years mixed up. I think 36. I was not, a little older than they were when I graduated. So Leslie's might have been. He was 34. And
Okay.
Betty was 36. I don't know how they managed that.
Oh, okay.
I think it was 36. Might have been 37.
Okay.
But
You know it's the largest high school in the state, don't you? Broken Arrow is now.
yes. That's another comparison. 44 compared to over 1,000 now. And teachers could teach back then before they finished college.
Yes.
In fact, you could get
Certified.
45 hours, and you could get a 2-year certificate. 60 hours would give you a 5-year certificate. So I went to school a long time after I got married, even before I finally got my degree. And we another thing back when I went to school, Mr. Anderson, the C.S. Anderson, their superintendent. I did light housekeeping that first term, and my mother would send food to me because I went to college on a shoestring, and he would go home for the weekend, and she would send food back to me, and my superintendent would bring my food to me for the next week. And then another semester, I was able to board for about $4 a week. room and board.
You had 3 meals for that?
Family type meals.
Yes.
The girls all sat around the table and ate good meals. If we had a flat tire, Mary Esther Updike and I went at the same time, and her brother drove us over there when we first started to get settled in. And I don't know how many flats we had. I know we had at least one on the way. And back then you had to take the tire off, find where the hole was, and mend the hole, and then pump it. I helped pump the air into the tires that day every time we'd have a flat.
Oh.
Can you imagine having to do that? I think he's like my grandchildren. I think he's bored with all this.
Yeah, I think he is a little bit.
I'd like to see him change a tire like that.
You could do it, couldn't you?
He doesn't know what we're talking about. That's okay. That's okay. We understand.
Well,
if this isn't what you want, well, just toss it and we'll.
oh no,
try to
this
get it
is.
someday.
This is. I think we've cut what I wanted to do. This was a good story. It covered a lot. I wanted to cover everything that we could that was in the story, and I think we have pretty well. Well, 86 years, you said you are 86 or 87? 100 years is a long time to live.
Beg your pardon?
That's a long time to live, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
And especially...
Never thought I'd be there this long. Never thought about my baby dying before me either.
That's probably the most difficult thing a person can face, I would think. My parents lost a son when he was 17 years old. And I can remember years after that, you know, find them crying, weeping about it, knowing they were missing him, still grieving over my brother. That's difficult.
Very.
I think we've really got a lot of interesting things here, and I really do appreciate your being willing to do this and the time that it's taken. And I will get a tape to each one of you. Let's see, do you have a video player, Mary?
No.
She doesn't, but Penny has.
Okay,
Her over there.
good. Okay, you can turn it off. And